they've studied what causes people to have stress. They've done a lot of studies on that. And the biggest problem at work is the amount of workload that people have. So in our society, we're like the world's greatest workaholics. I think us and the Japanese win the prize for the most hardest working group of people. And we're almost a little masochistic about it, okay? But basically, you know, some jobs are so stressful. If you happen to be a police officer in LA or New York, and if you're out fly fishing on your vacation, you have a heart attack or some kind of problem with your health, they will actually pay that as disability because they recognize that people in stressful jobs have health problems, whether they were injured on the job or not. So this is interesting that they're drawing this connection between stress and our health. And whether we believe we're healthy or not, or whether we believe in stress or not, does affect how our body reacts. In other words, our perception of the stress, I should rephrase, the perception of our stress affects how we react internally. And what this study said was, basically people who believe that stress is affecting their health a lot, so people who wake up and go, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out, it's killing me. I mean, think about that self-talk. It's killing me? Well, you say that enough and your body will start to make that come true for you. I'm not saying that we can just dream our stress away, but I'm saying we can take stress and we can magnify it or we can make it smaller. And that's what the science says too. So people who are very focused on their stress all the time in terms of how it's affecting their health, they had higher incidences of heart problems. So we want to talk about what adrenal stressors are. Now, a lot of what you're going to see today, you're going to go, well, adrenal stress, I mean, I'm living my life. How can I avoid this stuff? Well, the point is that you can't. But you can start to understand how the things that happen to you affect your health. Then you can figure out ways to help your body get over it much faster. I mean, getting the cold for 2 weeks is different than having the cold for 6 hours. You still got the cold, but you got over it fast, or it took you 2 weeks. We're interested in helping you get over life's bumps quickly. A new job. Losing a job and going into interviews, putting a resume together after 20 years, that's tough. It's very stressful. Moving across the country, across town, across the world, that's stressful. A lot of unknown variables involved. Family problems, relationship issues, parents fighting. Whether you're the kid, it's super stressful for you. If you're the parent, well, it's stressful for you too. And of course, you know, death of a loved one, loss of someone dear to us. These are all very big stressors. You've heard of people's hair turning gray after, you know, someone was widowed or something. Well, that's the emotional toll of the experience expressing through their health. All their vitamin levels change and boom, gray hair. So stress affects us all. These are some of the big ones. Overwork and underplayed. Those of you familiar with that movie know there's a scene in there where the main character, Jack Nicholson, is writing over and over and over again, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Definitely a creepy scene, but when we don't do things that give us joy, it hurts us. So working harder all the time doesn't always yield better results. There's a law of diminishing returns with hard work. So I encourage all of you tonight who are workaholics like myself to find where that line is and then put it down for a while. You will feel better. You'll be smarter and you'll be more effective at work too. So we know these are big stressors partly because of how they figured out about adrenal stress in the last century. They did studies on animals, heat stress, cold stress. You've heard of the heat stroke. You've heard of hypothermia. Well, these are major stressors to your body. I'll get into what your adrenal glands do, but basically being too hot for too long, it's a major stress, same as being cold all the time. It's hard for your body to adapt. If you could take your imagination for a minute and think about the strongest, healthiest person, the most well-rounded, healthiest person in the world. You could throw them into the Sahara Desert, no water, and they're going to adapt and cool their body off better than everybody else. Take the same person, drop them off on a glacier in Antarctica, they'll generate more body heat better than everybody else. That's what being, in a way, being healthy gives you that flexibility to adapt to your surroundings, and it's your adrenal glands that are involved in that process. And I'm pointing right here because the adrenal glands sit right above your kidneys, one on each side. So hot and cold extremes, this is a big one. This is something for everybody to consider. This is the blood sugar roller coaster. And we're going to go over this in more detail, but skipping meals, I used to skip meals all the time. I never could figure out why I was always grumpy and had a bad attitude, and you know, life felt really harder than it should be. It's because when you don't eat, you're living off adrenaline and you're living off cortisol. And we'll get into this tonight. This is the reason why stress is such a problem. It's because of what your body does in reaction to stress. It's taxing. So the blood sugar roller coaster is, let's say, eating orange juice and oatmeal for breakfast every day. You get a nice spike of blood sugar right after you do that. But around 10 o'clock, you crawl into the break room to have coffee and a donut because you're crashing. You're going into low blood sugar. And if you don't do that, you're going to get shaky and have all these other symptoms that people deal with. And so then you have your next snack, and it spikes your blood sugar again, and then you drop again. And so that up and down is wearing out your body's ability to adapt. So you're hurting yourself. So part of what we will talk about as far as solution is controlling your blood sugar will make a huge difference in your hormones as well. Every hormone problem is a blood sugar problem. Every one. So you treat hormones before you treat blood sugar, you won't really see good results. It'll be a lot longer before you see good results. So chronic exercise, I love people who work hard. I love people who give a solid effort in life. I mean, you know, I admire athletes. But there's again a law of diminishing returns, and we need to be careful. Some people, I meet patients who work out 5 days a week, and the more they work out, the more weight they gain and the worse they feel. Well, sure, drinking water is good for you, but sitting at the bottom of a pool for 10 minutes isn't. So it's too much of a good thing is bad. And knowing the difference is really what the art of this is all about. So this is really stressful. People who are going through training. This was a study from businessinsider.com, and they had basically shown some pictures of people who are sleep deprived. This is after one night of lack of sleep. So before you spend any money on vitamins, before you spend any money on external things, fix sleep. Fixing your sleep will fix most of the problems that you have. It will help them so much. Because that's what our body changes after several days of lack of sleep on the left. So sleep is a huge adrenal stressor. When we are up all night for some reason, it changes our hormone pattern for the next 24 hours. So it's basically impossible to burn fat if you didn't sleep the night before. Makes it very, very hard because of the hormonal changes that happen. And then chronic infections. This will be the 7th big stressor. And you got to realize that your adrenal glands they kind of are like always in the background of your life, keeping you balanced. You feel good, you have energy, your life is going well, you're staying healthy. Well, the reason that's happening is because your adrenals are working to fill in all the gaps that show up. But a chronic infection is very stressful to your system. So people who are in the hospital with an infection of some kind, they get like E. coli, or they have sepsis, they have some kind of bacterial infection, their adrenal glands are going to go into overdrive to try to save their life. Because what happens when you're sick, if you happen to be hospitalized, even with a surgery, and let's say you don't eat, you weren't able to eat for 20 days. We know people who've been in the hospital and they weren't actually eating food for 20 days. Well, how do you survive that? And the way you survive is you release hormones like cortisol. And what cortisol does is it goes into the body's savings account, which is the muscle tissue. So when you're sick, you eat your muscles. You eat your non-essential parts of you to keep you alive, so that maybe if you survive this sickness, you have an opportunity to go eat again and rebuild that muscle tissue. So having good stress response and good adrenals is a good insurance policy against staying healthy no matter what comes your way. Okay? And actually, when they study longevity, muscle mass is the #1 predictor of how well we age. So it doesn't mean you need to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You just need to have healthy amounts of muscle mass, because that's your long-term savings account for when you get sick. So cortisol is what it all comes down to. Cortisol is kind of I don't know if there's a good cop, bad cop dichotomy here. Adrenaline, maybe that's the good cop. Cortisol, definitely the bad. What's not shown on this graph is adrenaline going into your bloodstream, but adrenaline is water soluble. It makes your heart pound, makes you sweat, makes your heart flutter. And adrenaline basically is in and out in about 20 minutes. So if you've ever had anybody cut you off in traffic and you took your breath away and you honked and you had a big kind of adrenal moment where you got stressed out and pissed off, you release a lot of adrenaline. That's what caused your heart to beat. But maybe 20 minutes later, that rapid heartbeat has calmed down. But what will take a lot longer than 20 minutes is cortisol. And the reason is that cortisol, when you have a stressor, cortisol stays in your body about 9 hours. So let's say someone cuts you off on your way to work, busy day, the kids were cranky in the morning, you got them off to school, got them fed, got in your car, ready to go to work, and then boom, some jerk just cuts you off and you just get really, just pushes your button, man, you're upset. Well, like I said, the adrenaline effect happens immediately, but it's gone in 20 minutes, but cortisol will be elevated 9 hours before it's out of your body. That's if your thyroid's working well too, and we'll get to that. If your thyroid is low, cortisol lasts a lot longer in your body, and I'll explain, but that's why when you have a stressful event or an argument or something happened in the morning, you still feel kind of bad later that day. It's because you're feeling the side effects of that hormone. So this stuff, we can't live without cortisol. I'm not saying everything it does is bad. I'm just saying it's so powerful, you need to keep it at a low level as much as you can. Because what will happen over time, this is why adrenal problems cause hormone problems. Over time, your body will try to make more cortisol and more cortisol at the expense of your other hormones, your sex hormones, because your body's really good. Like I said in the beginning, your body's a genius. It doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't have an ego problem. It doesn't mess with you because it's having a bad day. It doesn't do anything wrong. It's just acting in its best interest at every moment that you're alive. So I think that's a pretty powerful idea. When you're under stress, your body goes into a process where it doesn't waste energy on stuff that's frivolous. And unfortunately, growing nice hair, strong fingernails, having good digestion, and ovulating or having a good sex drive is fairly frivolous in terms of your body's long-term survival. So if you suffer from those issues, you're looking at the side effect of some adrenal stress in your life, okay? So the reason is that cortisol is made from cholesterol, which is a good thing for us, not a bad thing. Cholesterol is not a bad guy. And it's this process called the pregnenolone steal, and basically the purple arrows are going like gangbusters. Those are stealing all the raw material from the other hormones because your body's going, well, making testosterone, making estrogen, making progesterone, I'm going to survive this stressful moment, and then maybe if I get a chance later, I'll make some more sex hormones and feel good. But it's all about survival. So your body's really very intelligent in how it does this, but that's why chronic stress is a problem for us. It changes our hormones. 10% of couples deal with infertility. This is the evidence of adrenal stress in its different forms. And high cortisol will cause fat to be gained around the organs. And so we have a machine in our office that's very useful. It's called a bioimpedance analysis machine. It's a mouthful, but basically it puts an electrical signal into your hand and your foot, and it runs these different currents through your body back and forth for a few seconds, and it can tell you what you're made of. It can tell you how much water you have, how much fat tissue you have, and how much everything else, how much liver, how much muscle tissue, how much dry mass you have. And you'd be surprised how many people actually qualify as what we would call skinny fat. And the reason why someone is skinny fat is that if you pinch their skin, they don't have a lot of fat underneath their skin. But because of the stress response that's gone on, they have packed fat around their organs. And I'm just kind of pulling your eye to this kidney right here. This arrow on the top left, you can see white. You can almost see the kidney in perfect relief there. That's fat, that's visceral. And that's just more damaging to us. It's like always sending off messages into our bloodstream that are inflammatory. It makes us just kind of feel not as good as we could. And so the good news, though, is when you start to fix these issues, that's the first place that weight is lost. A lot of times in weight loss, people notice their clothes change first. That's because that stuff is being burnt. So your body's really smart. It would rather not have that there, but it's doing that to protect you. Because if you had a whole lot of fat in your bloodstream, then you would have like a clot or an embolism or something. So your body's storing fat as best it can. So to illustrate this idea of stress, there's a really great video. There's a great book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And I'm going to let you enjoy this idea. This is a researcher who studies animals. He studies baboons in Africa. His name is Dr. Robert Sapolsky.
If you're a normal mammal, what stress is about is 3 minutes of screaming terror on the savannah, after which it's either over with or you're over with.
For a few weeks every year or so, Sapolsky shifts his lab to a place more than 9,000 miles away on the plains of the Masai Mara Reserve in Kenya, East Africa.
You live in a place like this, you're a baboon, and you only have to spend about 3 hours a day getting your calories. And if you only have to work 3 hours a day, you got 9 hours of free time every day to devote to making somebody else just miserable. They're not being stressed by lions chasing them all the time. They're being stressed by each other. They're being stressed by social and psychological tumult invented by their own species. They're a perfect model for westernized stress-related disease. Because what stress is about is somebody is very intent on eating you, or you are very intent on eating somebody, and there's an immediate crisis going on.
When you run for your life, basics are all that matter. Lungs work overtime to pump mammoth quantities of oxygen into the bloodstream. The heart races to pump that oxygen throughout the body, so muscles respond instantly.
You need your blood pressure up to deliver that energy. You need to turn off anything that's not essential. Growth, reproduction, you're running for your life. This is no time to ovulate. Tissue repair, all that sort of thing. Do it later if there is a later.
When the zebra escapes, its stress response shuts down. But human beings can't seem to find their off switch.
We turn on the exact same stress response for purely psychological states, thinking about the ozone layer, the taxes coming up, mortality, 30-year mortgages. We turn on the same stress response, and the key difference there is we're not doing it for a real physiological reason, and we're doing it nonstop. After a while, the stress response is more damaging than the stressor itself, because the stressor is some psychological nonsense that you're falling for. No zebra on Earth running for its life would understand why fear of speaking in public would cause you to secrete the same hormones that it's doing at that point to save its life.
So, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers is a great read, and there's a whole Nova special on that. But he studies baboons, but the baboon interaction and their social structure is very similar to ours. Basically what he said was they don't have to spend much time getting food. So of the 12, 14 hours a day that they're awake, that they're not having to survive, they just mess with each other. And they have a very alpha, hierarchical structure where the top dog just poops on the one under him, and they just mess with each other all the way down. And when he does his studies, he looks at their stress, blood tests, and it's driving them crazy. It's the same, so they're a good model for us. Their hormones are getting way messed up. The lower they are on the rank in the troop of the baboon troop, the more heart disease they have. If you can imagine that. So we're susceptible to that same idea. Now I'm going to read a few symptoms, and I want to see a show of hands who feels this regularly. Mood changes, trembling with your hands, paleness, sweating for excessive sweating, dizziness, blurred vision, headaches, extreme tiredness, or hunger. Does that sound like something that someone in here experiences on a regular basis? You got to be careful with your blood sugar. Those are all symptoms of low blood sugar. And you hear a lot of talk about, oh, my blood sugar's too high. Well, yeah, high blood sugar is a problem too. But I'm going to suggest that for the person who's experiencing it, low blood sugar feels way worse. It's actually more miserable to have low blood sugar than high, because your brain depends on sugar in order to function. And all these symptoms, shaking, paleness, loss of appetite or extreme hunger, a lot of headache problems, blurred vision, those are the side effects when the brain doesn't get fuel. And it actually kills brain cells. That's what this study basically says on this next page. So hypoglycemia, I used to be the kind of person who I would skip meals because I knew that if I just didn't eat and I waited a little bit, I'd get another boost. I'd get that second wind. Well, the second wind people are just adrenaline junkies. And I have to say that we're all adrenaline junkies. Every one of us, because adrenaline feels good. It gives us stimulation, turns our brain on, we can focus, gives us, it wakes us up. It's like, it's its own drug, I guess. That's why people do all kinds of crazy things. They climb big mountains or jump off bridges with parachutes attached, or they fly jet planes that are experimental aircraft. I mean, the only people that would do that are absolute adrenaline junkies. There's no other benefit. So, and that's okay. Just recognize that if that's what you do, that's why you're doing it. But even people who don't do extreme sports are adrenaline junkies. People who skip breakfast, people who skip meals, people who put themselves in situations that's very stressful a lot, they may be doing it as a way to stimulate themselves. And it's important to recognize that. Because when we talk about blood sugar, you can do a blood sugar in the morning at the lab and it's like 85. Oh, you have great blood sugar. Well, what they didn't test for was what happened the 12 hours before. Because you had the wrong food for dinner, or you didn't eat enough all throughout the day before, and your blood sugar spiked after your dinner meal, and as you were sleeping it just kept dropping and dropping and dropping, and all they did was take a test right when it was dropping, and then it goes down and back up. And so what I'm really talking about is this up and down high blood sugar and then dropping really quickly. That feels terrible. It feels horrible. Has anybody here ever worked out or done like a race or a soccer game and just like gotten nauseous like 20 minutes after you started working out and you want to puke? Or you're working out so hard that you just get dizzy and you feel sick? Well, what that is, that's your body dumping all this adrenaline into your system really fast because your blood sugar is dropping way too fast. Way too fast. So blood sugar, it says here that it kills white matter, which is like we're talking MS-style problems where you lose white matter and you have neurologic symptoms, tingling, numbness, you lose the ability to, lose function in your body. So low blood sugar is not a joke. It's a big deal, okay? So eating frequently is one of the most basic things that we should all do. There's really no excuse to skipping meals. We as people are grazers. And the only time to fast is between dinner and break fast. That's why they called it break fast. So, interesting just about how your body works. You have a little sensor in your carotid artery that sort of samples your glucose level every second you're alive, just reading, it gets a read on how much blood sugar you have. And so that's the way your brain figures out where your body's blood sugar is. So if you have a bad communication between the nerves in your neck and your brain and you're not getting a lot of neurologic information passed back and forth, your body's not going to be able to balance blood sugar as well. So all things being equal, you want to make sure that this little sensor in your carotid arteries is doing a good job of telling your brain where you're at. Because the more information your brain has, the better the response from your brain. Your brain is, sort of the central processing unit. It's this amazing computer. But just like any computer, if you give it bad data, whatever it spits out is just gobbledygook that doesn't help you. And so a lot of what we do in natural medicine and chiropractic is just kind of help the brain and the body talk so that the brain knows what's going on and then it can make a better response. And that's going to benefit everybody. So one thing I want to point out about low blood sugar is your body responds to low blood sugar by using your adrenal hormones. So when we talk about adrenal stress, and I've talked about keeping your cortisol as low as possible, the reason you eat frequently is to keep your adrenals from turning on and having to work hard, because they're working hard because of other problems: taxes, mortgage, kids, family, moving, all those other stressors we talked about. So if you add the food stress on top of that, that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. That might be why you get sick and you gain weight, even though you're doing everything you've always done. your pancreas works super hard when this is going on too. And so what this chart shows is to the right on the horizontal axis, to the right is like blood sugar after a meal. And as you go left, it says 120, 180, 60. So right about blood sugar of 60 is really getting dangerously low. I have a patient who's had clinical depression for a decade. And I look back at all of her blood records, and every time she went in to get her blood drawn, after 12 hours of fasting, it was like 51, 52, 50, 56, and no one's ever told her that she has hypoglycemia. Well, the number one cause of depression is low blood sugar. Because if your brain doesn't have what it wants, you feel depressed, and it actually lowers your brain function. So what this is important for us is that your pancreas increases a hormone called glucagon when your blood sugar drops. So blood sugar goes down, insulin goes down, glucagon goes up. And the reason this is important is that when your body makes this stuff, you can't make stomach acid. So when you're under stress and your body responds, all the non-essential stuff is tossed out the window. Digesting your food is non-essential if your body is under stress. Because that goes way back to our ancestors when they faced famine and fire and animals trying to eat us. We just don't focus on digestion when we're running for our life. So when the blood sugar drops, you're giving your body a signal that you're living in a famine. There's not enough food in the world. It's a dangerous place, and I'm starving. Well, when that happens, your body goes, well, fine, I'm not going to spend energy breaking down the next meal. This is why when people skip meals and they go all day without eating and they get through their shakes and they're crashing and they get all distracted at work because their brains gets foggy from all the low blood sugar, and then they go to eat again, they're like, I'm full after 3 bites. Well, you're full after 3 bites because you're not making any stomach acid. So the other effect on digestion is, imagine, again, in your mind's eye, you have really 2 bodies inside of yourself. You have what they call the soma. This is, again, like weird Greek words, but the soma is the shell. It's the body wall, the stuff you can feel with your hand, your muscles, your bones. That's the shell. And then you have the viscera, all the stuff that lives inside it, all your organs, the stuff that keeps you alive. You can cut off parts of the soma. You can lose your arm, leg. Someone can bite your ear off. You can live a long, happy life. You can't lose your viscera. Can't lose your heart. Can't lose your liver, okay? So there's kind of 2 bodies you have. When you're under stress, all the blood flow goes to the soma and the viscera doesn't get nourishment, okay? So in other words, one of the big problems with being stressed out, of skipping meals, of having your adrenals turn on, is it takes all the blood out of your core and it pushes it into your muscles because you're getting ready to fight or flight. You're either going to fight or you're going to run away. And you're not going to do that if all the blood's in your stomach. Make sense? It's all beautifully designed, guys. It's a perfect system. But again, the blood flow to the GI tract goes down when we're under stress. So this is why I believe adrenal stress is at the kind of the root cause of all these symptoms that we feel. It messes up our digestion, and who here has perfect digestion? Again, it just reduces the blood flow to the gut, and when the gut gets low blood flow, the gut becomes acidic. It loses oxygen, and it's hard for those cells that line our intestines to be healthy. And so then when we eat, we're going to be more likely to have food allergies. We're going to have hives when we eat. We're going to get headaches when we eat because of all this stuff that's not working right in our digestive process is really irritating our system. And that's because we've been under too much stress and the blood hasn't gone to the gut to nourish it, because blood brings in oxygen, nutrition, and it brings out toxins. It's okay if this happens once in a while, but chronically, we have a problem. They used to think in the 50s and before that, all ulcers in the stomach were stress related. Stress causes ulcers. And they just didn't, they looked and looked and looked for a cause to ulcers besides stress. And in the 80s, this one doctor, really smart guy, I don't know his name on the top of my head, he figured out there's a bacteria called H. pylori. Anybody heard of H. pylori before? It's a bacteria that lives in like 30% of humanity's stomachs. And this guy said, well, this is what causes ulcers, and he kept drinking this stuff over and over again, until he gave himself an ulcer, and then ultimately that would turn into stomach cancer. So a lot of gastric cancers come from H. pylori infection. And he got, I'm not sure if he got the Nobel Prize, but I mean, it was pretty cool he figured that out. But then they realized 30% of humanity has this bacteria in their gut, and 30% of humanity doesn't have an ulcer and doesn't have stomach cancer. So then they went back and said, well, it's stress that causes the immune system to not work, and then the H. pylori goes crazy, and then you have a problem. So in the end, it's still stress. Anybody here dealt with Raynaud's phenomenon? Like white hands, feet, like cold air just turns them white, and it takes a few hours, takes a while for them to come back. What you're looking at is you're looking at effects in the skin of the stress response that I was just describing, of the blood being pushed around into the muscles, and it's not going to go to the skin either, because the skin is sort of, you're not going to get blood flow to the skin, you're going to get blood flow to the muscles. And so the Raynaud's phenomenon is really the body's, it's evidence of like a stress reaction. It's just over exaggerated. And so the blood vessels in your hand get so tight that they stop allowing any blood flow to go at all. It's like they're overreacting, they're just constricting. And so then they turn white. So we know it's a blood flow problem because the color of your hand changes. If your hand went numb, you'd know that's a nerve problem. Okay, if the sensation changes, it's more of a neurological problem. But if you see like something turn purple or something turn white, something turning purple is that there's too much venous blood pooling there. The oxygen content of blood goes down and its color changes. If it turns white, it means there's no blood getting there. So stress, Raynaud's, fix the gut, makes a huge change. I've seen it a lot in our practice. So you produce this stuff. Anybody here ever done an IgE food test, like an allergy test? They take your blood and they like send it into the lab and they see what you react to. And what they're using is they're using what's called immunoglobulins, and these are little proteins that your immune system makes, and they fit like a key into different locks. And they're basically saying, okay, if you have a reaction to apricots and kale and green beans, your body's treating those 3 foods like a toxin and it's reacting to them. But you make another type of immunoglobulin in your gut. It's called SIGA. The stuff that they do those blood tests with for food is called IgE. You don't need to get too technical with that. Just know that IgA is like a barbed wire that protects your gut from bad things coming in. Okay? Without IgA, our gut becomes inflamed. And cortisol, that hormone that we release when we're stressed, makes it really hard for our immune system to make IgA. So there's another mechanism how stress hurts our digestion. And it all goes back to the gut and pretty much every chronic problem. So making more IgA helps your immune system and helps your digestion. And it calms down any inflammation you may have. So this is another benefit of lowering your cortisol. So that beast of a dog there is a lot less scary with that muzzle on his mouth. And when you're under stress, your immune cells that are like those attack dogs that kill cancer-infected cells, that kill virus-infected cells, they're called natural killer cells. They're part of your lymphocytes. But when you have a lot of stress and your cortisol has been up for a long time, it slows down how well those cells can clean your body out. And everybody you've ever met on this planet has cancer cells in their body. It's just how we live. But when our body's healthy, it kills them and removes them as they're generated. So we want to promote immune health and our ability to fight off disease, and lowering our cortisol to normal levels is a key part of that. So with the muzzle on, your immune cells can't go and do what they're trying to do, which is keep you healthy and kill bugs. Another thing we'll see on blood tests when we look at patients is they'll do a complete blood count, a CBC, and we'll look at the immune system. And you have different parts of your white blood cells. You have neutrophils, they kill bacteria. You have lymphocytes, they kill viruses. You have monocytes, they're like Tasmanian devils. They just chew stuff up, a lot of different things. Then you have eosinophils and basophils. Basically, you should have a certain proportion. You should have 60% neutrophils, 30% lymphocytes, 8% monocytes and 3% eosinophils and almost like 0 to 1% basophils. That's a normal, balanced immune system. And what we'll see on patients when they do their blood work is their lymphocytes are like 18% or 20%, and their neutrophils are 75. So it's gone from 60-30 to 80-20. And that's due to stress. And so they're good at killing bacteria, but the lymphocytes kill viruses, the cold virus, the flu virus, herpes virus, viruses. That's what these cells do. So stress really does affect our ability to kill viruses. Cortisol makes that happen. This is what a candida looks like in the gut. And candida's, it's kind of a hard thing to get rid of sometimes for patients. It's a fungus. It's normal in everyone's gut. It's normal to have candida in your gut. But when you take antibiotics, the research is pretty clear. It makes candida a lot worse. And the reason why is has anyone here not been up to the Sawtooth? Anybody not been through Stanley and seen the beautiful forested hillsides? Well, if a wildfire comes through and just kills all the trees, what grows back first are these invasive species. They're not really that pleasant to look at. They're hogging all the sunlight. And it's part of how the hillside regrows. Well, your gut's the same way. Taking antibiotics is like a forest fire. It kills everything. And now when you eat food and the nutrition comes back, the yeast grows like crazy. So if you've been on antibiotics, sometimes they can't be avoided, but there's things you need to do to restore yourself, and there's a lot you can do naturally to improve the yeast issue, for sure. And so people with adrenal fatigue often have this type of an infection that's kind of chronically flares up as they go through their weeks and months. And so this is just an example of something that really stresses out the adrenals trying to deal with this chronic infection. And I'll just say one more, there's ways you can clear that out pretty fast. We can clear out a big problem with candida in about 10 days on a protocol that we have. So it can happen fast. And we talk about the gut because what goes on in the gut affects the brain. So your brain and your gut, they're having this conversation, and what you eat is like information that goes into your brain and gives your brain an idea of what the outside world is like. Is it rancid fats and fried food and a lot of like garbage chemicals, and then your brain will be inflamed because that's what you ate. If you're nourishing yourself with the right food for your body, then your brain is going to feel that a lot better. But really what you need to know on this slide is you see two colors. You see red and blue. The red molecules are released from your immune system in your gut, and when those go into your bloodstream, your heart pumps it all the way around your body, and it gets into your brain, and then your brain goes, oh man, that's inflammatory. And so the brain starts acting, it's hard to focus, brain fog, memory problems, bad sleep, pain syndromes. These are the side effects of having problems in your gut. But when you get the stress under control and your gut starts working better, you get these blue molecules. They're sort of calming chemicals that your immune system makes. And it goes into the brain and goes, all right, the digestion's working well, and your brain goes, great. Now I'm going to invest energy in growing new brain cells, making new brain connections. My memory's going to improve. I'm going to learn things and get smarter. That's kind of the seesaw equation that we're working with. So, we're talking about brain health, and cortisol. Different hormones cause fat to go in different parts of your body. And cortisol is the beer belly. It has nothing to do with drinking IPA or drinking lager. It has everything to do with cortisol. Cortisol puts fat around the belly on the human body. It's just what it does. And we know that as the belly grows, because of the changes that happen inside the body, because of the inflammation, it actually has a negative effect on brain size. So a bigger belly hurts the brain, and they've measured it, and they've shown that the brain actually shrinks a little bit as the belly grows. So there's so many benefits to increasing your overall metabolic health. Just being overweight to begin with allows you to recycle cortisol. It's just the way we're built. The fat tissue on our body activates cortisol that the liver just spent time inactivating. So the more weight we carry, we literally are more stressed out, all things being equal. That's because we have more cortisol running through our veins, and that's one of the side effects of extra fat tissue. So they looked at insomnia. It's a really common complaint in my office. You know, doc, I'm just not sleeping, you know. What's going on? And there's a lot of reasons for this. But you can take it to the bank that when you wake up in the middle of the night and your mind is racing, and maybe your pulse is going, and maybe you're a little sweaty, maybe even hungry, you have low blood sugar and or you have high adrenaline. Because the side effect of adrenaline is mental alertness. So if we go back to that story about getting in your car after you had a difficult morning in your house, getting everybody ready, getting them out the door, and you had a little snap with your partner, and now you're just your feathers are ruffled. Now you get in the car and some jerk tries to cut you off again. Well, you can't go take a nap. You're not going to be able to just pull over the side of the road and put your head down and go, I'm tired, I'm going to take a nap, because stress wakes you up. Stress wakes you up. So if you're finding yourself waking up in the middle of the night, something is causing your body to release adrenaline. And there's reasons what we look for. There's reasons why. A lot of it has to do with gut and detoxification. But there's always a reason why things happen. And so they looked at, this study was from last year, they looked at women who had insomnia, and lo and behold, women who can't sleep have much higher levels of cortisol at the wrong time of the day. You should have low stress hormones as you go into 10 o'clock and midnight. It's part of we have sort of a circadian rhythm. We should have high stress hormones in the morning because, hey, that's when we wake up. You know, the sun comes up, we got to get going. And then as the day goes on, those hormones kind of gently go down, and then towards evening they drop at their lowest, we go to bed, and it starts over the next day. But there are situations that cause that cycle to get flipped upside down and distorted, and I'll show you a test at the end how we look at that. So sleep problems are stress and adrenal problems. One causes the other. It's like yin and yang. It's like a snowball effect. So working on sleep, even if you have to take an herbal tranquilizer or melatonin to go to sleep, I'm going to say that there's probably some side effect of taking melatonin for 20 years to sleep, okay? But that side effect is probably that big. The side effect of not sleeping is gigantic. So you got to weigh your options. So sleeping, taking something to help you sleep is going to benefit. Again, high stress hormones is poor sleep. So when you're waking up in the middle of the night, it's stress hormones in your body. The question is why, and how do we come up with a way to lower those stress hormones? Coffee drinkers, coffee is a healthy thing. I'm not here to say it isn't. But I'll say a couple caveats. If you skip meals and you drink coffee instead, shame on you. You're hurting yourself because you're taking a low blood sugar situation that already has high adrenaline, and then you're adding more to it. That's what coffee does. Coffee increases our adrenaline, and that's good. It makes us feel good. I'm not saying coffee. Studies have proven conclusively coffee is a very good thing. In fact, in the United States, it's our best. It's the number one antioxidant that people have in their body. If we took coffee away, we'd have a lot more disease in our society really fast. So there's a lot of antioxidants in coffee. But I'm showing you this because you can see that when people with certain genetics, some people here. So what you're looking at is you're looking at the dark gray and the light gray. Okay. The dark gray are really good at breaking coffee down. So they don't have a ton of adrenaline release. These are people that have coffee after dinner and they go to sleep. I'm jealous. I like the taste of coffee. There's no way I could ever do that. I'd be up till like 7 the next day. So you're lucky if you can do that. You're probably in the gray group, the dark gray. The light gray, that huge spike, those are people who drink 3 or 4 cups of coffee throughout the day. They're dumping so much more adrenaline, like 3 times more adrenaline, and that's due to their genetics. So if that's you and you have trouble sleeping, dial back on the coffee. That will make a difference. Melatonin's really good for us. Really, 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 really good for us. If cortisol causes all these problems with our gut and our digestion and our stomach and our immune system, melatonin reverses it. Okay? Melatonin actually lowers your cortisol. Sleep lowers your cortisol. So the best way to fight stress is to get nutritious sleep. And I say nutritious because, it's 8 hours, you're sleeping deeply, you had a good dinner, you didn't go to bed with an unresolved conflict in your house. Fix all your... If you have an argument in your house and you have something stressful, try to clear that out before you go to bed. Don't just lay in bed and perseverate it. Don't postpone difficult things. Do them fast and then get to get to the place where you can rest. But this basically shows that the more melatonin prevents the increase in cortisol, and it also helps us sleep. So it's a very, very beneficial thing. Several patients of mine, and I think myself included back 10 years ago or so, we would just get tired in the middle of the day for no reason. It's like 2 o'clock, you eat lunch, a couple hours later, boom, you just have to take a nap. Can't even stop yourself. Or maybe you just fall asleep almost like a narcoleptic. You're just sitting there and then you just crash out. That's a sign of actually low stress hormones. Like you've depleted your stress hormones so much you can't even stay awake anymore. And that's not good either. We don't want to have super high stress hormones. We don't want to have no stress hormones. We want to be in the Goldilocks version, where you're in the middle, where you're balanced. And so people who are falling asleep like this guy in the middle of the day at inappropriate times, they have an adrenal problem. They have an adrenal problem. Sometimes people need to be boosted up. Sometimes people need to be calmed down. And it's just on an individual basis. So a lot of this stress that we experience is really the cause of depression in our society. I mentioned the blood sugar. Blood sugar is the #1 cause of depression. But what they did was they looked at patients who are clinically depressed. They also looked at patients who had congestive heart disease, and they were also depressed. And then they decided, well, let's just measure how many stress hormones are in their bloodstream. Well, wouldn't you know it? The people who are depressed have much higher levels of dopamine and adrenaline in their bloodstream. Yeah, if you're running for your life all the time, emotionally or metaphysically, metaphorically, and you're in the stress response, your body's not going to invest in things that make you feel good, because the signal the body's getting is that it's a famine, it's a war, it's the end of the world. And if we live that way day to day, we start to become what we call catabolic. And catabolic is the opposite of anabolic. So we've heard of people taking anabolic steroids. And anabolic steroids make people look big and put some muscle on them, so it builds us up. Well, catabolic stuff breaks us down. It breaks us down. That's really what stress does in the big picture. So keeping our stress hormones in balance, if we're dealing with depression, that's one of the main ways we do it. And it may be a food that triggers the immune system to increase stress, and that causes depression. That's all it has to be, guys. Just a food that people are eating. I mean, it could be that easy. This is just an interesting study that showed if you eat more protein in a certain kind, like branched chain amino acids, it'll lower the amount of stress hormones in your brain. So people who are dealing with mania is like people who just dump so much adrenaline they just can't calm down. They're just totally, I guess it's what we would maybe call having a nervous breakdown. They're just switch got flipped and they just can't calm down. They're really ramped up. What they did was they gave these people high doses of protein, and that calmed them down much faster than the placebo group. So, what you eat affects this stuff. So people who are skipping meals and eating a lot of carbohydrates are really doing themselves harm. Branched chain amino acids are great. People who are athletes are usually aware of this stuff already, but it's really good for everyone to take these nutrients. So just a testimonial real quick about someone who is very stressed out. All right, we're here today with Vicki, who's been a patient of ours for several months now. She's made quite a transformation. And Vicki, would you mind telling the viewers what you were going through when you first came in?
Well, when I first met with Dr. Rostenberg, I was kind of going through some depression and some weight gain issues and self-esteem issues and having trouble sleeping at night and a lot of allergy issues. And since I've been seeing Dr. Rostenberg, I feel wonderful. I've lost, almost 40 pounds now, and I don't have trouble sleeping at night, and just, making healthy choices in what I eat, and I found that I don't have to starve myself, and I actually get to eat 6 times a day and quite a few calories. It's just making better choices in the food that I take in, and it's helped in all areas of my life. I just have more energy and sleep better, and I'm happier, and my health is improving with my blood pressure and my cholesterol, and I've tried all kinds of other things in the past and none of them have worked, and this is the only thing that seems to work. It's just going through that detox and resetting my metabolism really made a difference.
So that's an example of, someone who you meet who's going through a lot of stressors all at once. I won't get into the details because I'm not going to share that with you. I just say that it was a very stressful situation, both personally and professionally for her. But she rallied and we worked together and we came up with a strategy for her to help her. And she did fantastic. And that's kind of the type of effects that we like to see in our patients, is what we expect and gun for with everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about thyroid, because thyroid is a big problem, especially for females. And that's because estrogen and thyroid have kind of a bad relationship. And I'll go into that, but you may have done a thyroid test and you see T3 and you see T4 and the doctors go, oh, that's great, you're normal. You're like, well, I still don't feel normal, thanks. But I'll give you a little information about the differences of these two hormones. The T3 hormone, it's like a Ferrari. It's way, way stronger and way faster and way more active than T4. So your body's very careful with how much T3 it lets out into the body, because it's very powerful. T4, on the other hand, is like that red Italian bicycle. They're both Italian, they're both red, they both have wheels, and they'll both get you from point A to point B, but T3 does a lot better job than T4. And what cortisol does, our old friend cortisol, is that it decreases the amount of T3. So the whole idea being, again, when the body's stressed out, it doesn't waste energy on things that are frivolous. And you having energy, your brain working well, and losing weight and having healthy digestion are frivolous things when the perception in the body is stress and alarm. And that's just how we're built. So cortisol does really affect the thyroid. A lot of thyroid problems are just adrenal problems. But since there's no medical test for adrenal health, there's no drug for adrenal health, there's no surgery, it isn't looked at. People are going to ignore what they don't get paid to do, guys. So if you don't get paid to treat it, it's just not going to be part of what you do every day. But cortisol is a player in thyroid problems. Basically, they were looking at people who were sick in the hospital, and their thyroid function went down because the stress response lowers the expense. You're not going to spend energy. Thyroid is all about metabolism. It sets the idle speed of your cells. So if your cell is supposed to idle at 900 and it's idling at 400, it's not going to run very well. That's what thyroid does. It keeps it at that right idle speed. And cortisol slows that idle down, again, because by slowing down the thyroid, cortisol's conserving your energy. If you're in a crisis, you don't want to waste energy frivolously. I mentioned in the beginning that cortisol lasts in your body about 9 hours. Okay? There's this thing called half-life in chemistry, and when you take a drug, it takes a certain amount of time for it to go in half, and then in half again, and then half again, and half again. Those are half-lives. 5 half-lives before it's basically completely out of your body. So cortisol's half-life normally is 9 hours, but if you have a thyroid problem, that cortisol may last 13 or 14 hours. So again, low thyroid means you're more stressed out. Higher body fat percentage means you're more stressed out, all things being equal. So getting these things fixed helps you deal with stress. It helps you rebound from stress much faster. Estrogen increases this thing called thyroid binding globulin, which is it's a lot like the UPS truck. If your thyroid hormone is the box they're delivering, the truck it rides on is this binding globulin. And when women are taking a lot of birth control, or they have exposure to estrogen, or they've had several kids where they've had a lot of estrogen in their body, a lot of the health problems that come from that are due to how it affects thyroid. So getting rid of estrogen effectively and helping your body detox that really helps your thyroid as well. So people with adrenal fatigue, especially women, they don't make a lot of progesterone, and they tend to just be estrogen dominant. And because you're not detoxing very well, the estrogen just keeps building up and building up and building up. And then on top of all of that, extra fat tissue creates estrogen itself. So a lot of thyroid problems, it's treating the thyroid is like treating your check engine light. It's just easy to see that it's off, but it doesn't tell you what's really going on. And so the research just shows that estrogen and thyroid, estrogen slows thyroid down. So helping your body get rid of estrogen and handle it well will help your energy level and your brain fog. And a lot of adrenal problems mimic what thyroid problems are. You know, achiness, not being able to handle cold, depression, dry skin, just being fatigued, brain fog we've already talked about, generalized aches and pains. Those are common in people who've been through a very stressful event in their life. And I'm not suggesting we live without stress, guys, because stress is part of being alive, but there's two kinds of stress. There's distress and eustress. Distress is stress that comes into our life and seems to tear things apart and kind of affect us negatively. And eustress, like maybe going to school and challenging yourself or starting a new business and going out there to serve people and to make a difference in their life. You know, these are stressful things, but it's a eustress. Taking care of your family is stressful, but it's a eustress. It has positive benefits. So there's stress by itself is not always the bad thing. I'm gonna, just in the sake of time here. So how do we beat adrenal stress? How do we treat it? Well, I've already given a few hints tonight. We use detoxification. We work with digestion, but I like to point out that heavy exercise, excessive exercise in someone who's already feeling the effects of adrenal fatigue can work against you. So patients will come in and they will say, I am, you know, I run and I go to the gym 5 days a week and it's just not working and I'm just so frustrated. Well, maybe what you do is you take 3 days of heavy workout and you commit that to doing yoga or swimming easy laps in the pool or taking an easy walk. And that gets you moving and it's good for you, but it doesn't stress you out. And then maybe a couple days a week you do something intense. Caffeine and stimulants, you know, all those energy drinks, again, the reason they work is they help you spend your adrenaline account faster. And we're all adrenaline junkies and it feels good, at least in the beginning, to have a lot of adrenaline. So avoiding stimulants if you're feeling like you're having trouble calming down and it's 11 o'clock at night and you're wide awake, just think about how much coffee you're having, think about your stimulants that you're taking, and maybe play with that a little bit. I talked a little bit about this already, but sort of stress-seeking behaviors. You know, we crave. When we have adrenal fatigue and we're going through that low blood sugar moment, this is where all our cravings come from. Because your body will rather eat a bag of potato chips or chocolate bars or cupcakes or muffins because it's easier to digest and it raises your hormones that make you feel good like dopamine and serotonin easier than cooking kale in a turkey burger and eating that. And that's the essence of the whole problem. So that's where your cravings come from. When your blood sugar drops, your brain is hungry for something and it looks at that muffin, it looks out your eyes at that muffin and goes, give me that muffin. Because that muffin's the fastest way to change how I'm feeling. And it takes a little bit of discipline or a little bit of planning to say, okay, we're not going to have muffins in the house anymore, so that option's off the table. So now you get to pick between green beans and kale or grass-fed beef and organic chicken. Which do you prefer? And then you make that up. But point being, cravings are a sign that the adrenals are getting stressed out. And it's a blood sugar issue. And so make choices that lower these stimulants. So I've already mentioned a lot tonight, and I'm just going to hit it again one more time. It's really, really, really important to eat frequently. So parents in the room, we spend a lot of time making sure our kids are fed, and we're going to make sure they're fed before we're fed, and pretty soon it's 5 hours and we haven't eaten anything. We need to maybe come up with a better strategy or something fast. Eating frequently doesn't cost anymore. It's just the right thing to do. Every time we skip a meal, we're doing something violent to our body. I hate to be that dramatic, but it's really true. So it hurts us. How do your toddlers act when they don't eat? Do they act very nice? Do they follow directions? Do they go to bed on time? Do they brush their teeth? Or do they scream and cry and jump off the couch and become little monsters? Well, we just learned a little bit of self-control, but on the inside, we're still experiencing the same problems. So if you're going to feed your kids, feed yourself, parents. And I'm talking to myself too, so it's something I'm dealing with in our house. But the paleo diet is a very common and popular diet. I will say with scientific evidence and with confidence that it's really good for most people. Most people are going to do great on a paleo diet. It avoids all the carbs, all the GMO stuff, all the toxins that are involved in that, healthy fats, good protein, good vegetables, a lot of nutrition in that diet. But there's a group of people who have a gene called apolipoprotein E. You may have heard about it, ApoE for short. And it's related to Alzheimer's. It makes it hard to pull cholesterol out of your bloodstream. That's 20% of the population, according to Dr. Stephen Gundry, who's an expert on this. So in that group, we don't recommend paleo, but we still recommend frequent eating. We just kind of add more carbohydrate-based diets. So nobody will benefit, in my opinion, nobody will benefit from a pure high carbohydrate diet. You should, a high carbohydrate diet in terms of grains. A high grain diet really doesn't have any health benefit, but high carbohydrate from some rice and some vegetables and fruits, there are people who benefit from that just fine. You add in the healthy plant-based fats like avocados and walnuts, and you just got to make sure that there's always good fats in your diet and adequate level of protein. And to me, an adequate level is your body weight divided by 2. That's the minimum that everybody should have in protein. Yeah. If you're sick in the hospital, it's your body weight times 1. Yep. That's how much protein you need. And if you're training hard, it's your body weight times 1. So people who are chronically ill, people who are superstar athletes, basically do the same thing. Lots of protein, lots of vitamins, lots of nutrition, lots of protein, lots of vitamins, lots of nutrition, because the same stress is going in the body. It's just one way is building someone up, and then this person's trying to fight for their life, but the same process is going on. And then sleep, I mentioned that. 7 hours or less is not recommended. But not everybody, I mean, in general, people who sleep 8-9 hours are going to have a better, lower stress than someone who sleeps 6.5 or 7. But as we age, we need less sleep, and it gets harder to sleep as we get older. So sometimes people make that up with napping. And I'm going to say that's probably a healthy activity. A lot of the world does siesta, and they just take time off, and it probably de-stresses them quite a bit.
So it doesn't have to be uninterrupted sleep?
It doesn't. It just needs to be nutritious sleep, meaning you're not laying there for 6 hours tossing and turning, and then you take a nap and you're not really sleeping. It's like if you sleep for 5 hours during the night, and then you sleep for a couple hours in the afternoon, and that's good sleep, then that's helpful. It just means that on a 24-hour cycle, you get enough. Yes?
Can I ask a question on the amount of protein? You're saying that you have your body weight divided by 2, and that would be the amount of protein that you have.
That's the minimum amount, in my opinion, that's like safe. That it would be the safe end of the low end that's safe. Yeah.
So if you were overweight, is that your ideal body weight? If you use that amount?
That's a good question. That might be modified a little bit based on how overweight someone is. But by looking at their body composition and really determining how much body fat they have, we can kind of figure out how big the smaller person is inside the bigger person and get an idea of what would be appropriate for them. But people who are trying to lose weight, high protein diets typically do help quite a bit because it provides steady energy. But then protein can be hard to digest. So we find a lot of people avoid protein because it doesn't make them feel good when they eat it. And that's because it's not breaking down in the stomach. So we want to get to the bottom of that. And if we can help improve digestion in the stomach, then we can actually improve, how much protein they're absorbing, and it helps them a lot. That's a good question. It is definitely, there's no hard and fast rules, but there's just generalities. We need protein, so people who eat a super low protein diet are hurting themselves. That's kind of the idea. And then I'll just say this goes without saying though, but just avoid stressful situations. I mean, don't put yourself in a compromised position that's super stressful if you have an ability to change. So think about, stand up for yourself, or some things can't be avoided. Some stress can't be avoided, but if you can think of a less stressful way to do something, just, consider it and give it a try, even if we have habits that always create stress. I know that a lot of our daily life is habitual. We're creatures of habit, so we do things without really being conscious of what we're doing. So be more conscious of the little details, and maybe there's a way to reduce the stress load in your life just that way. Just a few ideas on nutrients. Vitamin C is really, really important for your adrenals, and vitamin B5 and vitamin B6. Those are probably the three main ingredients your body uses the most to make cortisol. So when you're stressed out and you're going through the stress process I've just been talking about for the last hour here, you end up peeing out your vitamins faster than they're coming in. And that's just something we talk about a lot in my practice, and it's true. Stress will cause you to lose, the account goes down faster than the account goes up, so it's getting depleted. And that's what sets us up to getting the cold for 2 weeks, because we don't have any zinc left, we don't have any selenium left, we don't have any vitamin C left. We've used it up trying to make all these stress hormones. So a lot of the nutrition we use that we recommend involves B vitamins and antioxidants, but definitely the B's and the vitamin C, and kind of the big picture approach is really good as well. This is a hormone test that we run in our office. I don't know if anybody here has ever done a hormone test for the adrenals, but it's not a blood test, it's a saliva test. And the saliva test is more accurate because the hormones we're looking for are the active form of the hormone. And what's unique about your saliva is that it's different than the bloodstream. In the bloodstream, you get the hormone that's bound to the UPS truck, like I was talking about earlier. It doesn't tell you actually how active that hormone is. So by doing a saliva test for the estrogen or the testosterone, the progesterone, DHEA, and then cortisol, we can get a pretty good picture of what's going on in someone's body. This test shows insulin resistance and low DHEA. So what's happening is, it goes back to that slide I showed at the very beginning, where cortisol is stealing all the cholesterol to make the stress hormone, and then your other hormones go down. So this is a female who's on the screen here, and the testosterone is high. It should be below 50, and it's 64. And in a female, high testosterone means there's insulin resistance. It's an insulin resistance problem, and that's just, when women become insulin resistant, they make more testosterone. When men become insulin resistant, they make more estrogen. It's just a flip-flop. And then the DHEA hormone is what makes your libido hormones, your testosterone and your progesterone. So having low DHEA means you just don't feel like yourself. And then the bottom chart right here, what you're looking at are you're looking at 4 samples. So the person sends in their saliva sample 4 times throughout the day, morning, noon, evening, and night. And in this case, they're not really making enough cortisol at all. So they've gone through the curve from going from the high cortisol phase down into the low cortisol phase. And that's why they're feeling, they sleep for 9 hours, but they're not rested. And anything stressful that happens around the house just throws them for a complete loop, and they're just way, way stressed out for more disproportionately to the stressor. They can't get going without caffeine. They just get fatigued in the afternoon. These are very common side effects of being in that's what we call phase 3 adrenal fatigue. So phase 1 is like the beginning, phase 2 is the middle, and phase 3 is the last phase before they call what someone would describe it as adrenal failure. And that is kind of like when the adrenal glands are just so tired they just hardly are doing anything. But what you need to know is that your adrenal glands will get stronger when we stop asking them to work really hard every day. They're like a tired horse. And you whip a tired horse, eventually the horse gives out. So the idea is, let the tired horse rest, follow these ideas we've talked about tonight with your blood sugar and with sleep, and just recognizing the signs of stress, and your adrenal glands are going to get stronger, and that makes you stronger. So that's the good news. And your body is really, really smart. It doesn't do anything to mess your life up because it wants to, or because it's having a bad day. It's just doing what it's doing based on the situation it's in and the information it has and the resources it has. And when you change the resources, you give the body what it needs, and you take away things that are irritating it, you just kind of get out of the way, and it'll start to normalize itself again. That's the fun part about all this.